I got married on a bright Saturday afternoon, under a sky with fairy lights, surrounded by friends, laughter, and promises of forever. It should have been perfect. Except my family never showed up. I had paid for their flights, their hotel rooms, even the outfits they would wear. I had done everything possible to make it easy for them to come. I moved the wedding closer to my hometown. I booked extra seats just in case. I checked and rechecked every detail, clinging to the hope that when the day came, my parents and my sister would be there to celebrate with me. But they weren't. At first, I thought maybe they were late, maybe their phones had died, maybe they hit traffic. I stood by the window in my white dress, bouquet trembling in my hands, waiting for them to walk through the door. They never did. When I finally got the call, my mother's voice was bright and casual, like she had forgotten the importance of the day altogether. "We couldn't make it, sweetie. Brooke's husband had a poetry reading. It was important." A poetry reading, not hers. Not even a close family member's, her husband's brother. As I stood there in my wedding dress, trying to smile for the guest who didn't know the storm raging inside me, I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. For my family, I was never the priority. That day changed everything, not just because they didn't show up, but because, for the first time in my life, I stopped making excuses for them. And I stopped making myself small just to fit into a family that never truly saw me. Planning the wedding had been my way of dreaming out loud, of building something beautiful with the person I loved. I wasn't aiming for a grand, extravagant event. I just wanted a day that felt like a simple, genuine, full of warmth. I found a small rooftop garden venue tucked away in Savannah, Georgia. It wasn't flashy, but it had a kind of magic to it, the kind that made you believe in beginnings. I picked a menu that included vegetarian options because my sister was trying out a new diet, and I made sure there was champagne because my mom always said it wasn't a celebration without it. I thought of everyone, every detail, every possible excuse they could have not to come, and I erased them, one by one. When my parents hesitated about the cost of traveling, I didn't flinch. I offered to pay for everything, the flights, the hotel, the rental car, even the new outfits they said they needed. I paid for my sister's husband too, just so she wouldn't have to travel alone. I told myself that this was what family did for each other, that it would be worth it to see them there, smiling at me as I walked down the aisle. I believed it because I wanted to believe it. Because deep down, a part of me still thought that if I worked hard enough, planned carefully enough, and gave generously enough, they would show up not just physically but emotionally too. The closer the day got, the more hopeful I became. I pictured my father walking me down the aisle, his arm steady around mine. I imagined my mother tearing up during the vows, holding my hand at the reception, telling me she was proud. I didn't realize yet that I was planning a version of the day that only existed in my head, not in their hearts. To them, showing up was never about loyalty. It was about convenience, about appearances, about what served their image, not what served their relationships. But I didn't know that yet. I was still the girl who believed that if you loved hard enough, if you gave enough, eventually you would be loved the same way in return. The morning of the wedding felt electric with possibility. I woke up early, buzzing with excitement and a little bit of nerves. My best friend, Evan, had texted to say he and his partner had landed safely. They had booked their own tickets, paid for their own hotel, and arrived without a single ounce of drama, just happy to celebrate with me. And meanwhile, I kept refreshing the airline app for my parents' flight. Landed on time. Good, I thought. They're coming. Everything's going to be okay. The hours passed in a blur of makeup brushes, hairpins, and final touches. Every few minutes, I found myself peeking out the dressing room window, hoping to catch a glimpse of them pulling into the lot. Nothing! The officiant came by around 3 o'clock. She smiled kindly, asking if we were ready to begin. I forced a grin, stalling. Maybe just a few more minutes. They might be stuck in traffic. I kept checking my phone. No new messages. I called my mom straight to voicemail. I tried my dad's number, nothing. I told myself not to panic. Told myself to stay calm. Told myself they were on their way. The makeup artist finished my hair. The photographer snapped soft pictures of my bouquet, sitting lonely by the window. Evan stood nearby, pretending not to notice my shaking hands. At 3:30, Evan gently knocked on the door. "They're asking if you want to start," he said quietly. I swallowed hard. "Let's just wait 5 more minutes," I whispered. My voice was too bright, too brittle. At 3:37, my phone finally rang. Mom's number. I nearly dropped the phone answering it. "Hi, sweetie," she chirped, as if she were calling from a vacation and not missing my wedding. "We couldn't make it," she said casually. "Your sister's husband had a poetry reading tonight. She didn't want to go alone. We had to support her." I stood there frozen. A poetry reading. That was the reason. In the background, I heard my dad laugh. "Maybe next time," he joked. Maybe next time. I hung up without saying much. What was there to say? As the music started to play, Evan slipped beside me and whispered, "Would you like me to walk you down the aisle?" I nodded, my heart breaking and healing all at once. And so I walked down that aisle, not with the people who had raised me, but with the friend who had always chosen me. So as I stood there in my white dress, clinging to Evan's steady arm, a lifetime of memories rushed through me like a flood I couldn't hold back. This moment, the disappointment, the abandonment, it wasn't new. It was simply louder, undeniable now. Growing up, my sister Brooke had always been the star. The girl with the shiny hair, the easy laugh, the designer shoes. People gravitated toward her like moths to a flame, and my parents basked in her light as if her popularity somehow reflected their own worth. I was the opposite. Quiet, bookish, the kind of kid who built Lego castles in the living room, while Brooke hosted glittery sleepovers upstairs. I didn't fit into their image of success, so somewhere along the way they stopped noticing me at all. I still remember the night I came home in tears after being left out of a party Brooke was throwing. My mom had barely looked up from her magazine. "You can't expect Brooke to invite just anyone," she said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "You need to toughen up," my dad added. And so I did. I toughened up when my academic scholarship earned nothing more than a vague smile. I toughened up when Brooke's small victories were celebrated with banners and brunches, while mine were tucked away like an afterthought. When Brooke bullied another girl so badly she switched schools, my parents brushed it off as teenage drama. When I stayed up nights tutoring classmates for free, it wasn't even mentioned at the dinner table. At some point, I stopped competing. I built a quiet little life for myself on the sidelines. I studied, I worked, I saved. I loved my oddball friends who didn't care about name brands or popularity contests. And still, a small part of me kept hoping that if I just did enough, achieved enough, became enough, my family would one day look at me the way they looked at her. But they never did. Instead, they celebrated Brooke's every misstep as if it were a triumph. When she dropped out of college, they bought her a new car to cheer her up. When she married a wealthy man, it was as if she had saved the family's reputation single-handedly. They didn't care that he was steady and kind. They cared that he had money, a good name, and that Brooke could boast about it. I saw the cracks early, the way she rolled her eyes behind his back, the way she talked about him like he was an accessory, not a partner. But when I tried to speak up once, just once, my parents shut me down. "Family is more important than your feelings," my mom had said. That sentence carved itself into my bones. Standing there at my wedding without them, I realized I had spent my whole life trying to earn a love that was never mine to begin with. And maybe it was time to stop trying. That night, after the last guests had drifted out and the rooftop lights swayed in the soft savanna breeze, I sat by the hotel window with my laptop open. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. My husband God, even now it felt strange and beautiful to call him, that stood across the room, still in his suit jacket, watching me with careful eyes. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked gently. I nodded without looking at him, my fingers already moving across the keyboard. "Yes." He didn't say anything more, he knew. I had gathered the evidence for months without even realizing it at first. Screenshots, snippets of conversations, little things Brooke had let slip over drinks and late-night calls she thought no one would remember. Proof that she laughed at her husband behind his back, belittled him, cheated on him when the mood struck. For so long, I had said nothing, stayed silent, swallowed the injustice because that's what good daughters, good sisters, good little girls were supposed to do. Not anymore. I attached the files to an email, addressed it carefully to Brooke's husband. No commentary. No explanations, just the truth laid bare. My husband crossed the room, sat beside me, and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. I leaned into him, taking a shaky breath. "Once you send it, there's no undo button," he whispered. "I know," I said, and for the first time all day I smiled, really smiled. Because the truth was, it wasn't just about Brooke. It wasn't even about my parents. It was about me, about finally choosing myself. For once, I wasn't going to clean up her messes. I wasn't going to protect their fragile egos. I wasn't going to make myself smaller to keep their world intact. I was going to let the truth stand on its own. My finger hovered over the send button for only a moment longer. Then I clicked. The screen flashed. The email disappeared into the digital ether, impossible to take back. I closed the laptop with a soft click, feeling something deep inside me uncoil, something that had been tight and aching for years. Tomorrow, everything would change. And for once, I wasn't afraid. The next morning, my phone buzzed so hard it nearly fell off the nightstand. 6 missed calls from my mother. 3 from my father. 2 from numbers I didn't even recognize. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I rolled over, tucked myself closer to my husband, and let the morning light soak into my skin. It was the first time in years I felt no obligation to run to their voices. By mid-morning, the text messages started pouring in, some frantic, some furious, some just desperate. Call us now. What did you do? Fix this. This. I didn't respond. I didn't even read them all the way through. Whatever chaos was unfolding, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. The real confirmation came a few days later. A cousin with the subtlety of a sledgehammer texted me. Yo, heard Brooke's husband dipped. Crazy. Family's freaking out. Dipped was one way to put it. Piece by piece, the story filtered back to me like rumors carried on the wind. After the poetry reading, Brooke's husband had apparently gone home, opened the email, and seen the truth laid out so plainly that even a lifetime of loyalty couldn't excuse it. There was no screaming match, no thrown glasses, no dramatic showdown, just silence, the dangerous kind. The kind where someone stops fighting because they realize there's nothing left to fight for. Within days, he had moved out, filed for divorce, quiet, surgical. And with him went the invisible safety net my parents had long depended on. He stopped covering the shortfalls on their mortgage, stopped making quiet payments on the loans they pretended didn't exist, stopped patching over the cracks they had ignored for years. The money dried up almost overnight. And I made my own quiet moves too. I canceled the automatic payments I had been making to cover their utilities, the ones they told everyone were gifts, but secretly relied on. I removed my name from the co-signed car lease. I closed the emergency savings account my parents had guilted me into helping fund just in case. No confrontations, no dramatic speeches, just a slow, deliberate retreat. The thing about collapse is, it doesn't happen all at once. It leaks first, little by little, unnoticed until it's too late. Credit card minimums got missed, invoices went unpaid, banks started sending denial letters instead of friendly reminders. And just like that, the carefully constructed facade my parents had spent decades maintaining began to crumble. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wished them harm, but because for once I refused to hold up a house that had never been built to shelter me. In the evenings, after work, and after the noise of the day had faded, the silence would creep in. At first I thought I would feel free, light as air, untethered from the constant weight of their expectations. And sometimes I did. There were moments when I caught myself smiling at nothing, breathing easier, laughing louder. But there were other moments too, moments when the grief hit like a sudden sharp wave. It wasn't the loss of people who had loved me well. It was the loss of the fantasy, the idea that someday, somehow, they would change. That one day I would say or do the right thing, and they would finally see me, truly see me. Little things would catch me off guard. Reaching for a mother of the bride frame in a store before remembering there had been no mother there to frame. Drafting thank you notes after the wedding and instinctively putting my parents' names on the list before crossing them out with a shaky hand. Hearing a stranger casually say, "You must have such supportive families," and feeling a laugh bubble up in my chest, not the happy kind, but the dry, tired kind you hear at a diner at 2 a.m., when the coffee's cold and the world feels a little too big. There's a certain kind of humor that settles into your bones when you survive people who were supposed to love you. Not the laugh out loud kind, the kind that's more like breathing through the ache. I spent a lot of evenings just sitting with it, the absence, the hurt, the strange, hollow freedom. It didn't feel like falling off a cliff the way I had feared. It felt like unclipping a heavy weight from my ankle and standing on my own for the first time. Wobbly, shaky, but standing nonetheless. I realized healing wasn't a straight line. It was 1,000 tiny choices, not to text them first, not to chase after apologies that would never come, not to shrink myself back into the small version of me they had always preferred. It was about choosing again and again to stay free even when it hurt, even when it was lonely. Because in the end, the loneliness of being true to myself was still better than the loneliness of being invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to love me. 2 weeks after the wedding, life handed me a new beginning I hadn't expected. I found out I was pregnant. I sat on the cool tile floor of the hotel bathroom, the little plastic test clutched in my shaking hand. The world tilted slightly around me, my heart beat loud in my ears. It wasn't planned. But it wasn't entirely a surprise either. We had talked about it, dreamed about it. We just didn't expect it to happen so soon. For a long time, I just sat there, palms flat against the floor, trying to absorb it. A new life. A clean slate. When I told my husband, he didn't panic. He didn't question it. He just smiled broad, genuine, and pulled me into his arms. "We're ready," he whispered into my hair. "You're ready." And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I believed him. We talked about names and nursery colors and what kind of parents we wanted to be. Quiet conversations in the safety of our little apartment, away from all the noise and judgment. And when it came time to decide who we would share our news with, the answer was clear. Not everyone gets a front row seat to your joy. Not everyone deserves it. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Brooke. I didn't answer the texts that still came sometimes, asking, demanding, pretending. Some milestones are too precious to hand over to people who would only use them to hurt you. This was ours. Ours alone. Looking back now, I realized that losing them wasn't really a loss at all. It was a release. A breaking of chains I had spent my entire life pretending weren't there. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't anger or confrontation. It's peace. It's living well without the people who once made you feel small. It's building a life where love is unconditional, respect is mutual, and joy is celebrated without jealousy. I don't regret sending that email. I don't regret choosing myself. Because every day since, I've woken up in a life that feels more real, more whole, than anything I ever had with them. If you've ever had to walk away to find yourself, you're not alone.